Hey you guys, and welcome back to my channel. Today I am here for a video that I promised you in January. I promised to release it in February, and it is June. I failed a little bit. I completely failed on that front, but it's here today. Better late than never. Honestly, this video has haunted me for the past few months. For those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, why am I being so dramatic? Why am I making weird faces and looking guilt-ridden and ashamed? I started a series called Romanian Rep Reads, in which my intention is to read books that have Romanian representation or are inspired by Romanian history or folklore or just, general Dracula stuff, and let you guys know how the representation holds up in my eyes. I am Romanian American, so obviously this is my personal opinion, my personal take on these books. I am not speaking for the entire Romanian community. That's literally impossible, and I would never claim to do that. This is literally just how I feel as a Romanian American person reading these books, what I took from them, what I thought about them. That's it. The goal of this series is to show how important representation is and taking care and time, and how, yes, if you are not from a specific culture, oftentimes you're gonna screw it up. Not always. There are some people who do great jobs. I'm just saying, a lot of the time, people really screw it up, and you make people feel bad, and you make people feel not good about their country, and also spread misinformation. That's kind of the point of the series, and also my quest to find representation that I actually like. We're reading books written mostly in English or in other languages, but not Romanian, and that are typically not written by Romanian people. But if you do have any books written by Romanian people in English, please let me know. I do research stuff, but it's hard to keep track of everything. Anyway, so I announced this back in January that I was going to be doing this. I picked out Blood Ex Libris by Raven Belasco, cover somewhere around here, and I looked at the summary and I was like, oh, I don't think I'm gonna have a good time reading this. But then I wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt. I wanted to do that for her. I wanted to give Raven Belasco a minute, and I read it in a day, because I didn't want to spend more than a day reading it because it was painful. I feel so bad saying that because Raven Belasco, as I'll get to, seems like a very nice lady, and I do feel like she tried. I feel like out of some of the books that I've read, I feel like she actually made an effort to include some real history in there and some real names and like food at one point. Like, she tried. So like, A for effort, at least. I don't think she's a malintentioned person. I don't think that she's a bad person. I truly don't feel like this was mean-spirited. It's just like the book itself was bad. Like, the writing was bad and the actual plot setup was bad. Planning out this video was so difficult for me because I just didn't know where to start. I have sat on this for what, like 3-4 months now, and I just didn't know what to say to you guys. I didn't know how to structure this. I didn't know how to make this a learning experience. I just truly did not know what to do. And I finally decided that, you know what, this video is not gonna be perfect. It's fine. I'm gonna just say what I think, say what I feel, and we're gonna go with it. The point of this is my honest reactions, but yes, I do want to make this informational. So we're just gonna go through it. The way I've split this up is that first we're gonna talk about the plot summary. I'm gonna read you the plot summary so that you understand where I'm coming from when I say, like, this book was not good. Then we're gonna go into language. Was the Romanian language used? Was it used correctly? Were the pronunciation descriptions correct? Because obviously I do think it's difficult for someone who isn't bilingual or who doesn't speak the language that they're writing about to give good pronunciation guides for it, in my personal opinion. But we're gonna talk about that. Then we're gonna move on to history. Did she get the history right? Because like I said, I do think that she made an effort to include history, but I don't know if I loved it in the plot of the book. But again, we're gonna get to that. We're gonna talk about culture. How was culture represented here? Like, how was it talked about? Was it good cultural representation? Then we'll talk about the plot, not the summary, but the actual plot. This is less of a cultural thing, less of a Romanian specific thing, but I can't make this video without talking about it because it's insane. And then I'm gonna be giving it like a rating about overall rep. I'm just gonna say how I felt about it while reading it. Obviously, someone could argue that like the intent of this book was not to do representation well, and to that I say, if you're gonna have characters go to Romania and you're gonna have Romanian characters, then you should try. You should try to do some decent representation, or at least talk to someone. I don't know, watch a documentary. So that's how I'm gonna try to structure all these videos. I want to do the same categories because to some degree I need to keep it consistent across books, otherwise I'm judging books like too differently, even though I know the intent of each book is different. So let's just get started. I've talked enough. I'm gonna read you the plot description. Also, I have my notes on my phone. This isn't a high school presentation. I'm not memorizing this for you. We're just gonna have quotes here from the book. Like, we're gonna go in depth, but I did not memorize this. I'm so sorry if that's what you were expecting. It's not what's happening here today. So before we get started, also, I would like to say that this book is very adult. There are a lot of sex scenes in this book that are not good. Like, they're not even good. So if you're watching this video, like, please be of the right age to watch this, because I do have to talk about the sexual elements of this book, because they are actually turn out to be a big part of the vampire culture in this book, and anatomy and biology. So I'm gonna have to talk about it. I'm gonna try not to be too gross about it. Like, I'm gonna try to be very scientific, but it has to happen. So I just want to warn you, if you're not into that, you don't want to hear about that at all, just skip those parts or don't watch this. That's all I can say. Blood, passion, and swords. And don't forget flamethrowers and one librarian in over her head. How did I get here, covered in blood, holding a sword I can't use? It all started when the dark, mysterious stranger showed up at my children's reading hour. Of course I noticed him. I'd been single and bored for longer than I cared to admit. Me, I'm Anushka, Noosh, Rossetti, head librarian. He turned out to be a vampire, and not just any vampire. Vlad Dracula. Although he goes by another name these days, and he says he's changed his violent ways. He definitely seemed more of a lover than a fighter, at first. In a whirlwind of passion and blood drinking, I made a crucial but impulsive decision. Share blood with him a third time, and give up normal human society forever, making my life among the Amur. That's what the vampires call themselves. The whirlwind just keeps spinning faster. Before I know it, I'm at an Amur summit meeting, and then abducted by Vlad's oldest enemy. He's hoping to use me to undo all of my lover and my new family's plans to save Amur society from tearing itself apart. I thought I was just going to archive some ancient books, but somehow I have to keep myself from being used as a pawn by the craziest bad guy ever. Escape back to the good guys, and I'm not sure how good they really are, across a desert. I don't even know what country I'm in, and not be killed in the process. I don't know how I will survive the next 5 minutes. Never mind, save my beloved's life too. So yeah, that's literally the plot. Like, I read you the plot, and I think it speaks for itself. I think we can move on to the language portion of this video, because that's all I can say about the plot right now. So in terms of language in this book, I'll say at least an attempt was made to have the Romanian language in this book. But the way it was in this book, number one, in terms of pronunciation, and the way it was incorporated were annoying for multiple reasons, and I'll explain why. I'm going to go through some of the quotes, some of the ways Romanian language was used, and then I'm going to tell you why it was annoying aside from pronunciation. I'll put the text on the screen when I'm reading quotes so you can kind of see verbatim like how it was written. But yeah, at one point she writes B on e. That's how she thinks a bine should be pronounced. Now, I tried to think, like, okay, we're assuming Dracula is Transylvanian, although he's like very old. At this point, I feel like he would have perfected like an American accent, but like, fine, he didn't. Still has an accent, like, that's totally okay. But that's not how even someone from Transylvania would say a bine. Like, they would say like a bine, like maybe. And that's not even me saying it in the correct Transylvanian accent, but yeah, they would maybe put the enunciation on the e at the end, so like bine, but like, it wouldn't be on it. I don't know what that, like, I don't know why she did that. That's really weird. Like, most people would say a bine or a bine. At one point, he calls her a draga mea, which is my dear, and her response in her head is Romanian? Sexy. He says sincer îmi cer scuze, which is I humbly and sincerely apologize, and they translate it. So at least there was a translation there. Then he says, nu, draga mea, I'm afraid that name has been e bine overexposed. She also over-exaggerates how often Romanian people say e bine in the middle of a sentence. Like, it's not uncommon. I'm not saying no one says e bine, like, it happens, but the way she does it, she tries to use it as a filler for like, and the places that she places it are places that like the average Romanian person who's speaking English would not do. That's another thing. So that's what I'm getting at here, is that I feel like a lot of people who who don't speak another language think that people who are bilingual, and this is from my own personal experience, I've talked to other friends who are bilingual, I've talked to my parents about this, so at least like there's a group of people who I know agrees with this, and this is also my own perspective. You try very hard when you're talking to someone, like let's say me, I'm talking to someone in English. There are a lot of times where Romanian phrases, Romanian sayings, Romanian words come into my head before the English ones do, and I never want to say them because I'm like, oh crap, this person does not speak Romanian. They're gonna have no idea what I'm saying. So instead I like pause for 30 seconds, have a mental breakdown about the fact that I can't remember the word in English, then finally remember it and I say it and I go, sorry, I could only think of the word in Romanian. And then maybe you tell the person, maybe they ask you like, oh, how do you say it in Romanian? And you tell them. But it's very uncommon, at least for Romanian people, to actually use Romanian like mid-sentence with people who don't speak Romanian. Obviously, if you're talking to someone who speaks Romanian and English, it turns into like some sort of weird hybrid Romenglish. Obviously, I agree with this. But I actually find that now in modern Romanian, people are actually using a lot more English words interspersed with Romanian. But still, people don't do this very often. It's very uncommon. Like, you make an effort to speak in the language usually that the other person you're conversing with understands. And I'm talking about people who are fully fluent in both languages. This is not a call for like, you know, someone who's learning a language and having difficulty and like maybe throwing words in because they just like don't know the word in English. I'm talking about, we're assuming Dracula has been around for like thousands of years and he speaks English at this point. Like, he does not need to use these vocal fillers that don't make sense and that people in Romania don't actually really use in this way while they're speaking English. It just doesn't work. Like, it sounds awkward when you're reading it. And I feel like this is a method that is often used to like indicate that a character speaks another language, and it's like doesn't work. It's just why like most people won't do that, because they want the other person to know what they're saying, especially if they are capable, because he translates. Like, he'll say something in Romanian and sometimes he translates, sometimes he doesn't, but he knows what he's saying. He knows how to say it in English, and it's like kind of like it's like excluding her. It's weird. He also says, "Nu, draga nush, nu. You must not get frightened now. I am not here to harm you." So as we've established, nu is no, draga is dear, so he says dear nush. Like that, it's still weird. It's still weird that he's not just saying no, dear Noosh. Like, it's weird, but at least fine. Like, she's established at this point what Draga means. She knows what Nu means. She's not confused. Then, this was my favorite line. I read this and I asked my parents over the phone. I was like, is it just me or is this weird? And they're like, no, it's weird. He says, Taci, micuțo, which is like, be quiet, little one. It's a little weird to call someone you're like romantically involved with little one. I'm not saying it's not possible. Again, nothing is impossible. Some people call people little one. Sure, it's weird. It was a weird moment. And I didn't like it, and it felt creepy and like all infantilizing and gross, and I didn't like that. Then he says, "Te rog, sarută-mă," he murmured. "Come to me, draga mea, kiss me." You just said, please kiss me in Romanian, then switch to English. You know she doesn't know what you're saying. Like, who are you doing this for? It's weird. It's weird. I would rather have had like a conversation, him having a conversation with someone who was Romanian, and then she could have written out the Romanian. That would have been super cool. Or fine, like he says no, or he says draga mea, like fine, that's a pet name. It's a pet name in Romanian, that's okay. But why is he like doing this? Because it doesn't make sense. He knows she doesn't speak Romanian. It just bothered me. For this whole book, this is the thing that bothered me so much. He says firar să fie, which makes sense because he's cursing. That was fine. That's kind of like, damn it. And that was okay. I was fine with that. And then there's a part where Noosh, we're only from Noosh's perspective, and she says, he was murmuring what I took to be Romanian expressions of tenderness, the mon petit chou sort of thing. I was like, okay, sure, great, love that. She also at one point describes the language as a clunky bastard language. I was like, what? Why? Why would you say that? Oh, and I forgot. So up until this point, because I'm reading the quotes in order from where I read them, he had not explained to her what draga mea means or micuțo. So then he explains that draga mea means something like my darling, my sweetheart, micuțo means little one. So he was just like doing that, and he just didn't tell her what he was calling her. And she was like, okay, Sure, that's fine. And then at one point he tells her to like come over. He says, come. I tried not to snigger at the accented and imperious come, which sounded just like all the cinematic vampires over on the other side of the room. I was like, that's not it. It's not it. I don't like it. Then she says he started to sing softly in Romanian, which sounded exotically like Italian, said with a kind of Russian accent. And that's where we get with like the weird exotic, oh, it's so exotic that he's speaking Romanian. Like he's so exotic and it's just not, stop it. Stop it. It's not that exotic. It's just a language. Stop being weird about it. Then he says, Hai să nu dezgropim morții, which means quite literally, this is how they translate it. Let's not disturb the dead, which is a fair translation. It doesn't literally mean that. It literally means let's not unbury the dead. Like let's not go dig them up. But yeah, the intent of that is, hey, like let's not disturb the dead. So fine. I think I would have just said like, which means this, which has the intent of this, because it's not literally that. If you translate it literally word for word, it means what I said. And then at one point, Dracula, being the real MVP, says, in English, please. Noosh does not yet speak our elegant tongue. Well, sir, you've been speaking Romanian to her this whole book. Why are you requesting other people to speak English to her? Because at this point, like, you never cared. You keep speaking Romanian to her. Why do you care now when other people try to speak Romanian to her? I don't understand. So you clearly know that she doesn't know your language. It just doesn't make sense. I liked this part. They go to Romania and they need to feed her because she's a human or whatever. Well, she's like kind of human. She needs blood and food. And so they just like do a list of just Romanian food, which was fair. There are usually a lot of options at the meal. Like there's usually a lot of different things to eat, but I just really liked it. There's pălincă, ciorbă de burtă, paprikaș de pește, mămăligă, sarmale, plăcintă cu mere, cafea. Pălincă is a hard liquor made out of prunes, I want to say, or plums. Are prunes and plums the same thing? I always get confused. A stomach soup. It's like a soup made with stomach. I don't know how to explain it very well. We have a fish dish. We have polenta. Sarmale are like cabbage rolls with like meat and herbs and rice in them. We have apple pie and coffee. So that was cute. I was like, it's fine. You just made a list of Romanian food, and honestly, I was nostalgic, so I was into it. Next, he said some insults that I'm not comfortable saying on my channel because they are very graphic and very inappropriate and really bad. So we're gonna move on from that. But are they used? Yes, 100%. Romanian people know how to curse. They will ruin you. They will curse you, and it's creative. It's not just like F you. It's fully like they will go after your family and generations and your ancestors. So that's the language portion. I feel like the summary of this portion is like she tried, but no. People who are bilingual, when they're talking to someone who doesn't speak the language they speak, really try to not use the other language that the other person doesn't understand, because it kind of defeats the purpose of like communicating with someone. And number two, weird pronunciations and weirdly interjected in there. So we're gonna move on to the history portion. So let's talk a little bit about who Dracula was, because I feel like that is relevant, and I do think that she did a decent job at least trying to incorporate some history. I don't know if I love the way it was incorporated. I think it could have been done a lot better. It felt very info dumpy, and like she tried too hard to summarize it quickly, so then it felt weird and like bits and pieces came out at different times, and it was just overall kind of odd. But she tried, and I'll give her credit for that. Dracula, who we think is Dracula, who people say like, oh, Dracula's from Romania. Name was Vlad Tepes. He was the ruler of Wallachia, which is a part of Romania. So essentially, he was the second son of Vlad II, Dracul, which was his last name. Also, a lot of places will summarize Dracul or Dracula or whatever or Dracu to mean dragon. It doesn't not mean dragon. It doesn't really mean dragon. Dracu, like when it's used in a curse or whatever, is like the devil. So that's a little tidbit for you also. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what I know. Like when I say that, I mean devil. When he was 11 years old, Vlad was sent to the court of Ottoman Sultan Murad II as a hostage, and it was like very traumatic from him. His father and his elder brother were assassinated. His father and elder brother were assassinated when he was 16, and he kind of spent the rest of his life avenging them. Romania has had a very long history of tension with the Ottoman Empire, and this is definitely an example of that. He really was not having it with them after they did that, and he spent his whole life, number one, avenging them, number two, trying to reclaim his father's title. Obviously, he's called Vlad the Impaler because he impaled people. He was just very ingenious with his methods of torture. He's described as like a pretty sick, twisted, brutal man. And while that's very true, his methods were very creative, and I feel like when he's described, people either go to one extreme where they say he was, oh yeah, he's Dracula, he was just vibing, and then the other half of the people are like, oh my god, he was the most disgusting, brutal man ever. And I agree, he was impaling people up their rectums. Like, that's gross and bad. But also, everyone was torturing everyone at the time. There were full torture devices that people were using at this time too. So like, he just had a spicy way of doing it, which I just think, let's not torture anybody. How about both sides? Let's just not be doing that. That's not good. Yeah, I just think that his methods, like I said, were just more creative, and so that's why he's super well known for being brutal, because he was brutal, but so was everyone. It was kind of be brutal or die. His opponents, while he was trying to reclaim his father's title, included the boyars and also his brother Radu, who was supported by the Ottoman Sultan at the time. He did reclaim it for periods of time, and he was really supported by the Romanian people for standing up against the Ottoman Empire because, you know, everyone was trying to go everywhere and fight each other and invade each other and claim land, and the Romanian people were like sad about it, so they were happy that someone was sticking up for them. Whether or not it was right or wrong, I have no opinions. It was a thing. He was at one point, I'm pretty sure, captured and decapitated, but he also, like, I think he got emissaries from the Ottoman Empire before this happened, obviously, and they were trying to call some sort of truce. He said he would only, you know, make an agreement with them if they took off their turbans, which, don't do that. And then they wouldn't, so he nailed them to their heads. So yeah, he was pretty brutal. He was willing to do a lot of things for what he wanted, which is kind of weird and kind of not good. So let's read the description, because I copied the quotes from when he's explaining his backstory to her and the history, so that I could kind of, you know, after I've given you a brief little history lesson, I will also, since that was very brief, I will link different videos down below of different lengths depending on how much you want to learn. I'll leave some like really short 3-minute videos talking about him, but also some of the longer ones, because I do think he's an interesting historical figure. There's a lot of misconceptions about him. People like only know him from the Bram Stoker novel, which, by the way, read Dracula, hated it, didn't like it. Are we surprised? No. But yeah, I just didn't like that book. And yeah, I think it's just interesting to learn more and go into more detail, but the point of this right now is this book and not me going into a history lesson. But if you ever want me to talk more about it, let me know.
Alexandru means defender of mankind. When I ruled Wallachia, I protected my people. They still remember me as a hero, and they are proud of that. A bine means a great deal to me. After I died, I could not go on calling myself Vlad. Looking like Vlad Dracula, and also having his name, was the sort of thing people would notice. The news of Vlad Dracula had spread far and wide since I was a crusader against the Turks, and known to a large part of the civilized world. I needed something common enough to make me stand out, but also I wanted it to be meaningful. I looked first to my family, although most of the names were not a bine, particularly helpful. For example, take Vlad. It was not just my name, but the name of my father, Vlad Dracula, but also of my half-brother, who fought me for my throne, and it was the name of my son Vlad. Once we found one we liked, we kept it. Another example, I had a brother named Mircea. My father's father was Mircea cel Bătrân. My father's father was Mircea cel Bătrân, and my other son I had named Mircea. And then there was Radu. Here he paused mid-sentence. Was this fascinating stream of information going to dry up? I gently prompted him. Radu? Radu cel frumos. That means the handsome. He was. I heard an excellent phrase the other day. They put the fun in dysfunctional. You could say that about my family. He shook his head as if to clear the memories like you would an etch-a-sketch. My father was fool enough to accept the invitation of Sultan Murad, the second of that name. I note for your fact-loving mind, Draganush. He was not pleased because he felt my father had not honored an agreement between them. The Sultan took Radu and me as hostages to our father's loyalty, since he was trying to win back Wallachia at the time. This was not uncommon. The Ottomans called the practice of stealing sons devshirme. My people called it the tribut de sânge, the blood tax. Radu knew how to get along with the people, and he took to the intricacies of the Ottoman ways with ease, with pleasure. We became close to the Sultan's son Mehmet. We did not have the terms homosexual or bisexual in those days. How I saw it then was that Radu became fully caught up in the indulgence of the Ottoman court. He also converted to Islam, which was for me more unforgivable. I, on the other hand, did not know how to get along with people I considered my enemies. I did not care that my father had struck a deal with the Sultan. No, I did not get along well with anyone. No one thought I was the handsome. Someone sounds a little salty.
There are some theories that his brother was gay or bisexual, but trigger warning for this: when Vlad and Radu were at the Ottoman Empire, when they were taken hostages, like, they were frequently raped and assaulted, and so then I'm pretty sure Vlad used to do that too as like revenge against the Ottoman Empire. It's like a very twisted situation. There are some theories that his brother was gay. I actually definitely want to look more into that because I'm not sure.
Then he keeps going and he says, you see our names through Western eyes. The Impaler must be the bad guy and the handsome must be the good guy. But for Romanians, Tepesh was and is good, strong hero. But for Romanians, Tepesh was and is the good, strong hero, and Cel Frumos, the weak betrayer. It was in the hands of the Turks, or rather in the prison of the Turks, where I first saw impalement. I was to become all too accustomed to it in my time in the prisons of Ergigoz, Tokat, Edirne. Every day, right outside my window, I saw people tortured and killed in a variety of creative ways. I was whipped more than once in the same courtyard where I saw so many suffer and bleed and die. Yes, the Turks taught me many things. After I died, the printing press became invented by Gutenberg, the one that excites you so, and it was responsible for mass-producing the German anti-Dracula pamphlets and vilifying my name. They relished in embellishing the most horrific details, inflating numbers and inventing many stories. Toată, you could say, out of the whole cloth. I became Shti, the bogeyman. Dracula became to mean devil, not dragon.
That's so interesting. Is that true? I don't know if that's true, actually. I forgot that this was a part. The first part was what I was saying, which was like everyone was torturing everyone, probably didn't even invent impaling, you know, we went over that. But I didn't know that it originally meant dragon and now means devil. That's very interesting. I will look that up right now. So it was derived from the Latin that meant dragon, but it means devil in Romanian. But yeah, it's very interesting. So yeah, I guess that it did change after with him and as an influence of him, which is so interesting. I love how history can influence meaning of words. I mean, it's kind of sad for him, but it's interesting that that is a thing. And again, that's super cool. I just learned that from this book. So that's what I'm saying. It's like she tried with the history. She made an attempt. She did it weirdly, but she tried. And then he says, so the whole impaler thing doesn't bother people anymore. I mean, I remember reading that you were constantly fighting with the, was it boyars?
And then she says, the whole impaler thing, as you put it, was a serious propaganda campaign against me. As I told you before, the invention of the printing press came at just the right time to allow the invention of international anti-Dracula propaganda. They took stories of what I had done to protect my people and distorted them. Some things they made up with their own twisted imaginations. My people know what I did for them, and they do not forget it. I can be both Romanian and Amur.
I'm not going to go too in depth about the different, like, names for vampire stages because that's not really the point of this book, but let me just say it's very complicated and doesn't make any sense. But the Amur are what, like, vampires like Dracula call themselves, or he goes by Alexandru in this book. That's the whole point. Like, he changed his name. That's why he's talking about the different names in his family. I'm gonna end the history portion of this with this long quote that is a little gross. So skip to the next section, which is the culture section if you don't want to hear this because it's a little nasty.
He had a castle called, what was it, Cetatea Poienari, that was it. He built it just as he wanted it. He built the dungeon right under his bedroom, so he could listen to the screams of those he ordered tortured to death. This is true, he was no stranger to captivity, but when Matthias, he was king of Hungary and Croatia, and we all fought each other, oh, many times. When Corvin Matthias had imprisoned him, I can no longer remember who had betrayed whom. First, he impaled insects and rodents to relieve his boredom. That is also true.
He's talking about Vlad Tepes here.
That is also true. When he had people, not just small, helpful things to torture, he did this. He would skin the feet of the person and pour salt on them, but that was not enough. He would bring in goats to lick the salt from the skinned feet. Can you imagine? It is also true. And he roasted children, not bad enough. Then he fed them to the mothers. And the mothers, he cut off their breasts and forced the husbands to eat them. And after all that, he had those husbands impaled. Yes, those things are all true, but they are not all. When he ruled the Wallachians, those you would now call Romanians, he got rid of the poor and weak by burning them alive. Does that shock you? It is true. In only 7 years of rule for a Tatlim, he did not rule very long. He killed at least 100,000, many of which were his own people. And what have I seen with my own eyes? After he failed to assassinate me, a most cowardly effort. I marched to Drgoviște to fight him on his own ground, but when I got there, I found 20,000 of my men impaled like a forest before me. And this after he had invaded Bulgaria and impaled even more of my people, men and women. I tell you these things are true since I saw them with my own eyes. I can still see them.
I'm pretty sure most of those things are true. He was gross. He was a brutal man. It's Vlad the Impaler. Makes sense. It's very gross. I don't like it. Do not do that. I don't condone this. The enemy in this book, if I remember correctly, it's been a bit, was like the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, and he is very bad. He does some very gross things. Like, there's some assault in this book, and like, it's just not, it was very gross, and it was not good. I just didn't love that. I was like, I don't know if we need to rehash these tensions. So yeah, we're done with the history portion. She tried, and I think she did more than a lot of people have done, which I guess is good. So I'm gonna give her like a decent rating on that, but you know, not perfect, but at least there was an attempt made, more so than a lot of other books that use Dracula as a trope. In terms of culture, like, there really wasn't much. Like, as you can see, it was mostly just like the historical elements, and I don't feel like there was that much effort made in terms of, like, considering they were in Romania at some point in the book, they really didn't try that much to talk about the culture, like the modern culture at all, but you know, I guess that wasn't the intent of the book. But yeah, there's nothing much to say there because there wasn't really anything. So we're on to the final part before I give like an overall representation rating, and that is plot, because I couldn't not talk about it, even though it has less to do with the Romanian aspect. It's weird. This book was so weird. At one point, the main character, Anushka, says, even if he was just an extremely rich weirdo, this was better than the living in his parents' basement type weirdo when she goes to his place. And I was like, this man, like, he was being really weird and creepy and kind of gross. And that was her reaction to that. Her narration style was so odd. It was weirdly stream of consciousness, but in a way that I did not have a good time. She says, also, I don't understand why you're telling me this in the first place. Alexandru Solin, who is Vlad Tepes, is hyphenated. At one point she says, Orgasmville. Another line, it was wonderfully polite of him to ask, I thought. Why not? Tonight anything was a possibility. Yes, yes, O Prince of Darkness, pour your hot, immortal blood through my weak mortal lips. He also at one point, oh my god, when he said this to her, I was shook, you guys. Is it not enough that I've fallen in love with you? Really? You have problems with your self-esteem. That is the phrase. Sir, do not be insulting women's self-esteems. I don't like that. Oh, and this is the part that I was talking about that was kind of explicit. I'm so sorry, but this is a plot point of the book. I'm gonna try to talk about it as quickly as possible. The premise in this book, because like I told you, there are sexual scenes. Vampires ejaculate blood in this book. He says, I do not produce semen. I have died. I cannot produce life. Blood is the fluid, the only fluid in my body. It is what my body runs upon. It is what my body produces. It was not you, not a problem from you. You woke up in, if you will permit me a little joke, in the wet spot. I have nothing to say about that other than it was really gross, and I had to put the book down for like 15 minutes after reading that, and I was like, the things I do for YouTube. Again, I'm not gonna go in. I could go into like the different levels of vampire, because there's like the main vampires, then if you drink blood 3 times then you become like a baby vampire and you have to go through this transition, and then humans have a certain name, and then there's different people, and like whoever you drank the blood from to turn into like the second stage of vampire is then you're like vampire daddy. It's very weird, and I don't want to go into it. It was just odd. You read the book if you really want to know, but I don't recommend reading this book. Raven Velasco also kind of pulled a Twilight, not in the sparkly vampire sense, but in the sense that like she really debunked all of the myths that, you know, garlic and vampires don't mix, which would be questionable because in Romania people cook with garlic all the time. Vampires would be screwed because they're all from there. So like why? But yeah, he says we can bathe in holy water if we want to. We don't have transformative powers. His shadow does not act independently of him. He can definitely be in pictures. He can cross moving water. They don't turn into dust. They're just kind of like sensitive to sunlight. So that's as far as I'll go in with that. The thing I'll leave you with for this section is at one point he said, you are speaking to someone who used to impale things when he was nervous. So you're telling me you like get a little nervous and you just, sir, I don't even know how to rate this. I would give it an F on plot because the plot was horrible, the writing was not good, and the character work was bad. I would give it like a B- on history, or a B. Let's give it a solid B on history. She did her research, she really tried, and I would give it like a C- on language. I feel like this means it's low-key a D- or an F. I feel so bad saying that because I told you I read the author's note at the end of this book and she seems like such a sweet lady and she really had a hard time getting published, and you know, good for her. There are people who love this book and I'm so happy for you, but as a Romanian person reading this, I was confused and I did not love it. I don't think the representation was that good, like I said, other than maybe some historical elements. But the thing is, I feel like she did her research and I'm giving her credit for that. But the way she introduced that research wasn't good because it leaves a lot of room for misinterpretation, confusion, vilifying one side over the other. It just, I think this could have been better done. I was very disappointed by the end of it. Yeah, I feel like I was giving her credit for things that is just because I've seen worse in books, and I was like, yeah, it's fine, but honestly, it's not really fine, and I don't like it. So that is the first installment of Romanian Rep Reads. Finally did it, you guys. Now I'm gonna be picking the next read that I can get started on, so I can wait another 5 months before I post a video in this series. I have to add a couple of books that I've discovered to this jar. This is my jar for choosing, but let's pick a book. I'm so scared. I don't want to read another one of these. It's fine. The Story That Cannot Be Told by J. Casper Kramer. I don't remember looking this one up, but I feel like this one could have promise, and I'm kind of excited. I really did not anticipate this. I'm not going to read the whole summary. It says it's a powerful middle grade debut with 3-starred reviews that weaves together folklore and history to tell the story of a girl finding her voice and the strength to use it during the final months of the communist regime in Romania in 1989. So I'm down for this. I'm down to give this a shot. I feel like it's different than the other ones I found. I found a lot of vampire books and a lot of weird mafia books and a lot of that vibe. I'm excited to read something that's middle grade but with historical elements. It's gonna be really cool and I'm excited. So yeah, maybe the next video will come out sooner, or maybe I just raised my expectations way too high and I need to lower them down a little bit. So thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you for being patient while I get my stuff together to be able to film this, but I'm happy. Finally got it out of the way, finally did it, and I had a good time filming this, surprisingly, even though I didn't say very many nice things about this book. And let me know, like I said, please, if you know any books with Romanian characters about Romania, like anything like that, please leave it down below because I need to add things to this jar. As always, my social media links are down below, like my Instagram, my Twitter, my Goodreads, and all that fun stuff. And I will see you guys in my next video. Bye!